personal relationship between Trump and Putin, which seems to have gone extremely well. It started with the opening welcome. You know, they shook warmly each other's hands and clapped each other on their shoulders. And then Putin was offered a ride in the presidential limousine, and they talked just by themselves without interpreters, so we don't know what actually was said. And also at the end, at the press conference, you know, Trump was very warm towards Putin. He referred to him as Vladimir. He also said that the Russia hoax was never real, and that Putin understood him while no one else understood him, but Putin had always understood him. So you think the personal relationship between Trump and Putin could hardly have been better. Okay. Then you look at the outcome, and there was no outcome. No ceasefire, no business deals we know of, and also no future meeting. You know, at the end, Putin said he invited Trump to Moscow, and Trump only very hesitantly agreed to that. And there was no mentioning of another summit with Zelensky, which had been in the room for quite some time, that the Alaska meeting would be followed by a trilateral meeting between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky. Yeah. To then settle the war properly. But above all, the absence of a ceasefire, I think that really means the summit was a failure.
Yeah, okay, and right now, presumably, President Trump is calling members of NATO as well as the Ukrainian president. What could he possibly tell them that they didn't see?
Well, let's hope so, because at least when we got on tonight, he still hadn't called Zelensky. Kiev was still waiting to hear from him. He probably has to explain what has happened during the summit. He will fill in some details, and he has to explain why a ceasefire was not agreed upon. He also will have to explain them why Putin continued bombing cities in Ukraine and civilian targets while the summit was in progress. This is a most unusual procedure, and Trump, of course, should have objected to that when he met Putin in person. All that he will have to explain, but I think the big thing is a ceasefire. Land swaps and things like that can only come after a ceasefire, at least a temporary ceasefire. And why that wasn't achieved, I'm sure Trump has some good reasons for that, and he will bring the explanation across, I'm sure. But, you know, basically, as Trump said, there is no deal unless there is a deal. Right. There clearly was no deal. Therefore, the summit was not successful.
Klaus, I also want to talk about President Trump. He loves the spotlight. The bigger the stage, the better. He did not take any questions. But also, you talked about that personal relationship that Vladimir Putin has with Donald Trump, and it seemed like the Russian president really knows how to play up to Trump. Absolutely. He was saying things that, you know, the relationship between the two countries hadn't been worse since the Cold War, but basically it's a good thing that Donald Trump is here now to bring these two countries together. Yeah. Is he playing Donald Trump?
Absolutely, and he has been playing Donald Trump for the last few months. He has always promised a ceasefire. They had various phone conversations, they had meetings, there were meetings at a lower level, and the ceasefire was always dangling in the room, and it seemed, and Trump often said that a ceasefire will be achieved, it's just around the corner, and that of course hasn't been the case, and it even wasn't the case today when they met in person. Putin also repeated what Trump likes to say, that if he had been president, there would have been no war. And this is totally ridiculous. You know, this is unlikely to be the case. Wars seldom happen because of who is in the White House or who is not in the White House. But by repeating that, Putin, of course, flattered Trump. He sucked up to Trump, if you like. And he knows how to play him. Yeah. Because Putin also knows that he is dependent on Trump. If Trump has all the cards, in theory, if Trump stops financial aid to Ukraine, that is much to the advantage of Putin. If Trump increases military and financial aid to Ukraine, then Putin has a problem.
Yeah, and I really want to talk about that too, because Trump has a history of punishing people who don't do what he wants to do, especially with tariffs. He didn't do that with Putin. And secondly, I want to get your take on Trump's body language, because when he came out of that news conference, it wasn't the sort of Trump that we're used to seeing, the one who likes the spotlight, wants to answer the questions. It just didn't happen.
No, not at all. I was a little surprised to see that. He looked a little sleepy, a little tired. He looked even a little disheveled, which normally he doesn't do. And Putin seemed to be his normal self. He was just as energetic and as dapper as he always seems to be. But Trump looked differently. And I think Trump knows that that summit was a failure, that he will be criticized for it. And I think that probably depressed him, and that knowledge he seems to have been aware of during the press conference. Also, as you rightly said, not taking questions is for Trump most unusual, because he likes to be in the limelight. He likes to play the global audience. And of course, he likes to be seen as someone who dominates politics. And he wasn't able to do that tonight, and that probably explains why he didn't take questions. Another possibility is, of course, that Putin didn't want to take questions, and that Trump basically had no other choice because he didn't want to take questions by himself and then embarrass Putin for not taking questions. But that is speculation, and we don't know.
Yeah, so I think in the next 24 hours, we're going to look to see how the White House spins this into something positive, and also wait to see if there's any kind of positive news about a future summit. Klaus Larres, always a pleasure. Thanks for your